Good day. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm happy that we have this opportunity to connect once again and hope it was a good week for you. I know that here's a couple things that stand out. Number one, I just love the interaction that you're having with one another, and I want to encourage you to continue to do that. Turn in a high quality post from the very beginning, and that they're researched, that they're well written. Make sure that you use a good tool like Grammarly to be able to fill in the blanks a little bit and help it to run smoothly. And then also make sure you cite and cite correctly. I want to know that everything that you are doing is that you connect it back to a source, especially if you're saying things like "in my opinion" or "in my perspective," or what, which is fine. I love that interaction, then the reflection of and the regurgitation of material, and then give your perspective on it. But really, this class is partially about your opinion and your perspective, but a lot about the author that you're reading, and then others that participate in the conversation, other academics, and then have them all have a conversation with one another through your writing, and then you can interject through that as well. But the idea is that I really want you to interact with the material. So this course cannot be as simple as read a book, regurgitate a little bit of the material, and then give your opinion on it. It can't be that simple, because it needs to be you. Good research, good academic work is going to be read the material, find other sources and other views, cite them as you go, and then process that material. It makes the task a little more challenging than just simply doing book reports. And I'm not looking for book reports. I'm looking for interaction on this. And you'll be graded accordingly, and you're going to see your grades that are going to reflect that. So, but I'm loving what I'm reading so far. I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I'm going to poke and prod you a little bit, and I'm trying to ask tough questions of you, and I think you want those difficult questions as well, because that'll help you to have a much better experience with this course. Now, unfortunately, see, here's the part of this. We have 6 weeks together, and I'm getting to know each one of you in different ways and seeing kind of traveling your journey through this program. I know that you would want more. 6 weeks is not enough. I wish we had like 12 weeks to spend together. And I know that life goes on. You have other things going on in life. But you can't do it. But wouldn't it be fun if we all got to spend time, really some concentrated time? But we don't. Alas, here we are for 6 weeks focused. And so 1 week on the state of marriage is not near enough. And I'm going to say that right up front, because so then the onus is upon you all to search out, to discover, to learn more. Let the Churlin book be kind of a springboard. Let the videos, let the other assignments that you have, interaction, let it springboard you into other things. My purpose for the first week was not to necessarily get us wrapped up in a cohabitation conversation, a same-sex marriage conversation, but to recognize those as parts of the landscape, not large parts, but they are important parts of the landscape for us in marriage ministry and helping to know the status of marriage and healthy marriage. But it also, the big capture out of that would be individualism, the tension of the church, the influence of church and religion on marriage within the culture, and some of the resolutions that he comes up with, but then other sources that come from that. So my encouragement as your professor for this material is explore other sources that are out there, and especially when it plays into your final paper, when you talk about your biblical and theological underpinnings for marriage, which the next 2 weeks are going to be a huge part of. We'll cover that in a moment. But then your philosophy of marriage ministry, what that looks like. I'm going to expect to see citation of and inclusion of the state of marriage. You're going to come to some of your conclusions, and you're going to have some of your theology and biblical understanding speak into the present facts, the present status, the realities that we face with marriage today, both individual marriage and culturally overall. So those are all important, and I want to encourage you to continue to dive into those. So a couple things in regards to these are going to help us transition. But first, a source I want to encourage you to dive into other sources, and a couple that I have found helpful is Marriage: A History by Stephanie Kuntz. Once again, she's a sociologist, and so she approaches it from that standpoint. This is not required reading, but it is something that I think you may find helpful. Something like this as well. I encourage you, as you are studying marriage and family ministry, you're getting a Master of Arts in Family Ministries, so you're looking at marriage and family and how it interacts with the culture. I want to encourage you've got to read sociologists, psychologists, as well as biblical scholars and theologians and practical ministry people. That'll help you be more fully rounded in this experience and prepare for what you have going forward. And especially as you're looking at your cornerstone topic, your project, you do not want to just run in ministry circles or only biblical and theological circles, but include some of those other folks as part of the conversation. And so books like that are going to help. Of course, you'll look at it through a biblical lens, which is part of what we'll look at the next couple of weeks. How the West was really lost. Let me say it again. How the West Really Lost God is the book. And this is one that I want to encourage you, by Mary Eberstead. This is a fascinating book about how the decline of marriage, our decline of religion, Christianity specifically, how it is in the United States and in the West here, how it has affected the marriage and family. And that's so this is a good read. And once again, another example, not required reading, but I wanted to put out there a couple options and books that you may want to capture. If you want more on the topic of cohabitation and same-sex marriage from a biblical standpoint, Glenn Stanton has a couple books out that speak to it. Marriage on Trial is a case against same-sex marriage and parenting, and it is a wonderful source, but it is published in 2004, and we when it comes to same-sex marriage, the cornerstone hinge historically for us will be the Supreme Court decision in 2015. But this is helpful because he gives a strong biblical, and he ties it into the theological and the cultural from a faith-based standpoint. Glenn Stanton also has come out with The Ring Makes All the Difference, and this is his biblical faith-based approach, Christian-based approach from 2011 on cohabitation. So the hidden consequences of cohabitation and the strong benefits of marriage. And so these two resources, suggestions for you, are going to be our segue into our continued conversation for this week. But I know that in your writing for this last week, in your post, there was a lot of conversation about these two topics particularly. And although I didn't want those two conversations to become a distraction, because sometimes we have some strong views and opinions from a faith-based standpoint, as we should, but I didn't want those to become too big of a distraction, but they're part of the landscape, like I said. So we really need to have a biblical and theological view of those. Stanton offers that and does a really good job, and you may want to interact with those if you want to dive in deeper and see that. So the two books coming up for these 2 weeks, once again, Sacred Marriage, and then The Meaning of Marriage by Keller. So Sacred Marriage is where we'll dive in. This will help us lay a foundation for our biblical and theological approach of marriage. And although we're moving on for the next 2 weeks for these topics, we want to continue to dive back into and make sure we have a clear understanding of the status of marriage, the landscape, and as well as what marriage is now from a biblical standpoint. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. I want you to enjoy the conversation, the interaction with one another. You each bring this value to the table from a perspective and your education and what you have read and interacted with, and want you to bring that to bear. Bring it to bear in your work. Really want to encourage you to stay on top of things as much as possible. It just keeps us all sharp and keeps the conversation rolling. So be timely, and I really appreciate all the timely turn in work. Be timely with responses with one another. I'm seeing the interaction and the time that you spend online. It all shows up on my report. Shows the time that you spend and the pages that you view. And the more, the higher those numbers are, because you have interacted. And I know you have busy lives. I recognize that. But the more you interact, the richer your experience will be one with another. So once again, my door is open through phone, through email. And if you have any questions or comments going forward, I encourage you to ask those. But hey, let's dive in for the week into the subject for the week. And that is start our conversation with the biblical and theological underpinnings for marriage.